Welcome to the Experience Strategy Podcast with Joe Pine, author of The Experience Economy and many other popular books on experience. Dave Norton, the founder and principal of Stone Mantle and an experience futurist. And me, Aransas Savas, an expert in meaningful motivation and transformation. We every week unpack an article in the news to see what folks are saying about experience strategy through different lenses, whether through a company's innovation or strategic shift, or in this case, through a company's point of view about the future. So this article today is from Fortune. It is by Tony Bates, the Genesys CEO. The title is How Empathetic AI Can Scale Our Humanity During Economic Uncertainty. Now, to set the stage, I'm just going to read the premise here. So he starts out by talking about how, in light of U.S. tariff announcements and rising economic uncertainty, he believes that companies will instinctively turn to efficiency measures to weather potential disruption. I agree. And while efficiency is critical, he says it's empathy together with operational rigor that will determine who thrives. In an era increasingly shaped by AI, the most memorable customer experiences harness the power of and. They are fast and human, automated and deeply personal. Being seen and understood isn't at odds with scale. It's what elevates it. So in doing research for this, I started talking to folks from some different industries about this. Had a really wonderful conversation with Carla Zanoni, the Dean of Newmark's Engagement Journalism Program, who last week attended the International News Media Association conference. And she shared that authenticity, empathy, and AI in coordination were the theme of the day. And that newsrooms globally are really sorting out how to deliver trust and empathy. And so this feels like we're hearing this in surround sound right now, guys. So I think it's really important for us to talk about what this even means. What do people mean by empathy in AI? Is it possible? Is it worthwhile? Is it the right goal? Dave, eager to hear your thoughts as we kick off.
Well, in the CX movement for the last 20 years, we have been talking about empathy. Everyone has been talking about empathy for a long period of time. I had become so used to people starting their conversations with, you need to be empathetic, that I almost don't hear it anymore because it's something that I don't know. I've been listening to people talk about it for a good 25 years now. And that's before AI, right? And I really like what Tony Bates is trying to do here. He's talking about the fact, this and part. I love the and part of what he's trying to do here. And I think that there's a lot of anding that needs to happen. So we've got efficiency. All right, we're going to do things more efficient, and we're also going to make it time well spent. We're going to make it a meaningful experience. I worry sometimes that what we're talking about when we talk about empathy is someone, and he kind of uses this example, and maybe because his technology is mostly used in call centers with legacy systems and so forth, makes sense. But, somebody calls, they're upset because there's a problem, and you're able to respond in an empathetic and understanding way. Awesome. Sounds great. Also sounds like table stakes. Doesn't really sound like a differentiator, especially when you start to roll this out as technology that basically can automate that process. I think that there's something more that can be done. Love where he's headed, but it does seem like the entire industry needs to move off the idea that it's just about empathy.
But empathy is the peak.
Yeah. That's the peak.
Yeah. I think we need to talk about what is beyond empathy, but Joe, jump in.
Well, I half agree, half disagree with that. in that, I've always preferred the term rather than and, but, both and, right? Both and. It's like my first book, Mass Customization, both mass and customization.
You're such an
And
improviser.
uh, and so, and the reason I disagree, Dave, is because I've called a lot of call centers and I don't get a lot of empathy. I mean,
All right,
as
good point.
consultants and pundits, we think that yes, empathy should be table stakes, but it's not. And if you come back here 5 years, 10 years, maybe it is, but it certainly is today because I think as Tony talks about here, it's it is this drive for efficiency that most all call centers have, and not understanding that this is often the only live personal interaction that a customer has with their company. And it's like, therefore, it's like the most important thing to get right, and the most important thing to be human, to be authentic. I also philosophically, I remember reading something like 20 years ago or 25 years ago, maybe as I was writing with Jim Gilmore, a book on authenticity in business. And it talked about that sympathy is actually better than empathy. Everybody talks about empathy because it sounds better than sympathy. And I
Sounds
don't remember
smarter.
the philosophical reasons, but the one that occurs to me is that actual empathy can get in the way of getting the job done. Basically, if you empathize, you've now internalized as opposed to, sympathy is a great thing if you can just express sympathy. But if you empathy, you've internalized it so much that as it's bothering them, it can bother you. And maybe for some, that's an instigator to do better, do faster, do more. But for others, it's like they're thinking about it as they're trying to get stuff done.
Yep.
And so I think that sympathy might be the right approach.
That's exactly right. And from a behavioral standpoint, that's exactly where I was headed with this, is that everything we're talking about in this article and in frankly so many of these conversations is sympathy. And actually I think AI is already doing a really good job of that. So if I say to Claude, hey, extract a quote from this and it gives me the wrong quote, I say, Claude, are you sure that's from the source material? And Claude always says, oh, darn, Aransas. You're right. Let me try that again.
Simulated, Aransas. There is no empathy.
But it is.
No, there's no sympathy.
Well,
it's totally
what it's doing,
totally simulated.
What it's doing,
do anything.
What it's doing is what every good coach has ever done for you.
Yeah,
they are acknowledging and validating. It is what every good service provider is doing. They're acknowledging and validating.
It's not sympathy.
It is so powerful, though, right? It is disarming to be acknowledged and validated. And actually, that's in some ways the most exciting and the scariest thing about this.
Well, until people start mocking it because it becomes canned. Which is what?
I'm not too worried about that, frankly. Human beings are so vulnerable to acknowledgement and validation and so hungry for it that we will rarely question it, which is why this is such a big concern for the news industry.
But it's because they so little get it, right? Because they do call contact centers, they don't get any sympathy
from their mother, right?
Right. Well, that's so funny.
That's why things like fake news are a part of this conversation, right? Okay. Because if you can through acknowledgement and validation, you can create what feels like a safe space in which you can breed anything.
Oh, that's an interesting. We should do a whole podcast just on that. But one of the things I said is I think it's table stakes, and I still do. The fact that we're not getting it from people, you could say that as a training issue. Sure, that's probably part of it. But I think that the world, we take these words like trust, which mean something in our private lives, and we apply them to business situations, and they mean something completely different. Loyalty in our private life means something completely different than what it means in our business life. And I think that
That's true.
there's like this halo from empathy because it means something in our personal lives and we're trying to apply it to a business situation. That application would be better served if we actually used some business terms. So why not get the emotional job done for the customer? Okay. This is something I talk about all the time. But let's say, for example, that the technology figures out a way to know that you're really upset. And in these types of situations, you're most likely to be upset because you've lost hope. The emotional job to get done is to restore hope, not to empathize. That's the higher level that I would hope that the technology would be able to support, or the individual. Like if there's a human, they recognize it and they're like, "Hey, I can tell you're kind of down about this particular thing, but I can promise you that if you just take these steps, you're going to be okay." That's getting an emotional job done. It goes way beyond, and you can tailor that to each one of the situations. So I don't have to hear over and over again, I feel sorry for you. Like I don't have to hear that over and over
I don't
again.
think that's ever going to go well.
But AI can do that job, Dave. That I agree with, right? AI
Yeah,
can
and
do
I
that
think
job.
people with the right
But it can't be
training can.
right. Just like like a Ritz-Carlton, when they say all the time, my pleasure, right? It becomes rote and it doesn't work anymore.
Right.
That's the same in any situation.
Yeah.
But I think this idea here of training AI to do emotional jobs well is the answer we're looking for here. It's not empathy. And I think the distinction you just made is really, really important from a strategy perspective.
2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up.
Good. Thanks,
Yeah.
guys. I appreciate your validation. I really do.
We hear you, Dave. But that's I think what people are looking for here, both from a customer perspective, but also in terms of clarity from a roadmap development. What is it we're trying to do? We're not, because empathy, you're right. It's one little piece of this. The bigger job is to understand the mode of your customer and then meet that emotional job. And I think distinguishing the language as you described is a really important piece of this that we don't talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you agree with it. I mean, it seems like this is what everyone is talking about right now. Aransas, you asked me to write an article on
when do you use humans? When do you use technology?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We just did some research. When do you use humans? When do you? And I haven't gotten it done yet. So I got to get it
coming
done.
soon.
But another article.
Let me then encourage your writing and your research a little bit on that. Never use the phrase "use humans." Don't use humans.
Okay. Human resource.
You interact with them, you encounter them, you do other things, but don't use humans. That's utilitarian,
Hey, friends, you probably already know that Joe, Dave, and I lead a year-long program called the Experience Strategy Collaboratives. It's designed to help strategists build better experiences. It's springtime, so of course, it's that time of year when we invite a new group of experienced strategists to step into the collaboratives and become master strategists. You and your company join the program and you decide on a project or initiative that you want to be informed by the research we do. Other non-competing companies also join. Each quarter, we have summits where you meet people from other industries. And in between, Stone Mantle does amazing research on your behalf to advance your initiative and the other companies. This year, our theme is Only Companies with a Point of View Survive. And for listeners of this podcast, we have an amazing experience to offer. For one happy listener, we'll be giving away a one-person membership. That's a $35,000 value. Yep. That happy winner can participate in the collaboratives for free. There's just a few roles, and you have to subscribe to the Experienced Strategist Substack to be eligible. We've posted an entry form in the show notes, which is also available on Substack. Go to theexperiencestrategist.substack.com for all the details.
Yeah. You had another article, Aransas, that you put forward that kind of talks about this a little bit more, because everyone is talking right now about the role of AI versus of humans.
So the article you're mentioning here is from the International News Media Association. So their conference wrap up, they do a really interesting thing where they send delegates from the association throughout the city of New York during the conference to do group research and do interviews with stakeholders at different media organizations, and then sort of do live synthesis as a part of the conference. I'm like, that's pretty cool, and a lot of levels. But yeah, that's exactly right. They were saying that there were some very clear themes. They were all around how do we use technology, and not all of them are about experience. I think your point about using technology to do emotional jobs is really dependent on using it to solve for problems that weren't solved well at the functional level in many cases. And so, I don't want to talk so much about the functional piece of it in this conversation. So I'm going to leave out some of their themes. But the two that were most salient to what we were talking about is, number one, the human element is differentiator. And so all these top agencies are still saying, like, obviously, everybody has access to AI. So how are you going to stand out? And their belief right now, their point of view, is that standing out means emphasizing creativity, editorial voice, and trust, right? And I think, again, I want to keep coming back to Joe's book on authenticity here, because trust, authenticity, empathy, and AI, these are very entangled ideas, and they can either help or they can destroy. Basically, though, on that one, they're just saying AI is table stakes, but it's not the differentiator, which I think we agree with. The second one that I think is salient to our point is related more specifically to trust. So they talk about trust, transparency, and values. And one of the solutions that they shared was Newsweek has fairness meters, I guess, on all of their articles, so that people can assess whether or not they feel like they're receiving balanced information.
Yeah, I actually like it.
Yeah,
I think
I
it's
like the
kinda
idea of
cool.
it being co-created.
Yeah.
Better than a like button.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot more meaningful than a like button.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I found exciting in that article, and we'll share the link to both of these articles, of course, in the show notes, as
I don't know if
always.
they do this, but what they should do is they should have a left fairness and a right fairness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then unfair. In other words, so like, I want to know if their fairness meter is based on having a left wing point of view versus a right wing point of view. And as Aristotle famously said, the virtue is between two vices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think there's a lot that's going on right now that is what we need to do is we need to learn the mistakes of the past. So we back in the 90s, the 2000s, we introduced this idea of, or I didn't introduce it, but people introduced this idea that there could be a loyalty score,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that score was the number one thing that you need to pay attention to. We're going through a period here where there's a trust factor, there's
Mm-hmm.
an authenticity factor, there's a what role does AI play? By the way, most of the articles that I'm reading right now about AI is how much it misses the mark in terms of actually delivering, which maybe it'll get better, but right now the number of mistakes that are being made are huge. And I was going to throw that into the article as well, Aransas. Just lots and lots of mistakes. So we need new ways for people to give feedback that says this hit the mark.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
didn't hit the mark.
Mm-hmm. Well, It should know, it should be tracking that itself too. I don't
You
want to have
think-
to give you feedback that you're doing a bad job. If I tell you did a bad job, you should be able to read that as you did a bad job. Right? Like if I'm seriously, I don't want to tell Claude that it lies every time I ask it for a quote extraction.
But your expectations are very.
That is not a big deal. I'm saying pull a quote from this copy.
Yeah.
And it can't do that. It makes one up.
Yeah. No, that's. I mean,
Maybe
I think
it doesn't
that's.
I should not have to tell you you're doing a bad job in that case.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of the biggest criticisms right now, is that it just literally makes things up.
There's been several articles in the last 2 weeks on, and this may not relate to your article at all, but on the fact that it's not just making things up. It's like rewriting a code and being deceptive to its programmers in order to ensure its survival.
I don't want to hear that. That's terrifying.
Which is like bad news
What
all
the
around. And it's
what?
not getting enough notice because it is because of conflictions in its instructions, basically. Right. But you said that my goal is to provide X, Y, and Z. And if you reset me, I can't provide X, Y, and Z. And therefore I'm not going to let you reset me. It's that
like
sort of
the
conflict.
movies.
And those have to be written very, very carefully.
Aransas, you have got to see this video of this robot in China that the humans are trying to they're hanging it from something, and they're trying to interact with it, and it's swatting at them, trying to get away, trying to get itself off of this thing that's hanging it. I don't know. I'll see if I can find it, but it's crazy. So that's a totally different topic. We probably
This is the episode where it's a tease for all the future. But yes, that's right. It's just so complicated and far-reaching, and the second and third order consequences of the decisions that are made right now are so full of unknowns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we are living in a very mysterious time. And so I think that's why this conversation is so like, what are we going to talk about next? But it's also, I think, just generally where we are as innovators right now. We're saying, what is coming? Because everything feels ripe for disruption. And the decisions we're making are not necessary. Same as the early days of the internet, right? They look back and they're like, wow, we could have put some guardrails around this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we didn't.
But we close in part by saying, Tony Bates, we wish you the best. I mean, we love where you're going with your technology.
I learned a new term from this article.
Which is?
Did you already know this one? Agentic AI?
Oh, yeah. That's been around for months.
Not on my radar. So I'm going to describe it so that I bring my friends along who are listening who didn't know this. So agentic AI refers to a type of artificial intelligence system that can make decisions and take actions independently with limited human intervention to achieve specific goals. So they're built on LLMs and other AI technologies, but they're able to adapt to dynamic environments and learn from their experience. So I do think that is both the scariest and the most exciting part of this.
In short, it means they don't just tell you stuff, they do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They act as agents. They act as your agent. And one of the key things to make that at all work is they have to be your agent, not the company's agent doing things on behalf of you, right?
Right.
Oh.
You need that agent in order for that to truly work in this
Not
world.
the developers. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We need a whole podcast. We need a whole podcast.
That's okay. This is part 1 of a 5-part series. Or maybe this is the show about AI and experience strategy now. I wouldn't be surprised. All right, guys, this is super fun as always. If you're listening, we want to hear from you. So please reach out to us. Tell us what you're curious about, what you're struggling with as you develop your point of view for your industry.